Wizards of the Coast has just released another batch of Magic the Gathering card spoilers for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. And I have to say, the theme for today seems to be crazy powerful mythics that border on being completely broken.
The Magic Historian.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well, because we are here to talk about brand new Magic the Gathering cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, with a specific focus on incredibly powerful mythic rares. And one of these cards genuinely feels broken to me. When I first read it, I went, all right. And then I went, whoa, wait a minute. This seems insane. We're going to save that one for last, though, because it really is the biggest and boldest of the bunch. Now, before we dive into that, I just want to let you know that the first installment of Innistrad Midnight Hunt lore is available over on my Fantasy Geographic channel. It's talking about the struggles of mankind and the ever-lengthening darkness. The days are getting shorter and things are getting very dangerous. So if you want to know what's going on in that regard, I'll leave a link to that lore video at the very end of this video. So you'll see it on the screen if you're interested in checking it out. Now, let us dive into the mythic rare insanity. We're going to be starting out with two different cards that are somewhat loosely connected and create a fun sort of enemy color. This is what we do, and this is what we do over here. So for you to better understand, obviously, we should take a look at the cards. We're going to start out with Tainted Adversary, which is a great example of the type of threats that are facing Innistrad right now. Things are really grim for mankind, and this is a very solid creature. 1 black and 1 gets you a 2/3 zombie with Death Touch. That already isn't too shabby for a card. Like, if this was just an uncommon, a black and 1 for a 2/3 with Death Touch, that's not terrible. Easy to splash, a decent sized body. Death Touch means it can handle blocking anything with no problem, and also makes it a little more of a hassle in terms of deciding whether you want to block it or not, because it can take down any creature of any size. But obviously, where this card gets really bonkers is when you take a look at its other ability, which says, when Tainted Adversary enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a black any number of times. So it kind of has a kicker kind of vibe, right? Kicker is you can pay this additional cost when you cast the spell and you get X different iterations of it, right? That's multi-kicker, right? So in this case, this is when it actually has entered the battlefield. So it's similar to kicker, but not identical. Anyhow, when you have this enter the battlefield, which I want to point out again, isn't when you cast it, which means if this gets resurrected from the graveyard or put into play in any other way, you still get to take advantage of this ability, which in my opinion moves it up the power scale compared to locking it in to when you cast it only, right? So you can pay a black and 2 as many times as you want. So for each time you've paid this cost, basically, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Tainted Adversary and create twice that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decay. So essentially, for every 3 mana you're spending, you are boosting this creature's power and toughness by 1, and you're getting 2/2 zombie creatures on top of it. And it is important to note that these tokens do have Decayed, which makes them obviously less useful than regular zombie tokens. Decayed tokens, once you've attacked with them once, they disappear, which is a huge drawback, right? And that's obviously why you get to make so many zombies on the cheap. Like, if you just look at activating this guy's additional ability one time when you put him out, right? Now he's a 5 mana, 3/4 with Death Touch that when he comes into play creates 2/2 black zombie creatures with Decayed. That feels really good for 5 mana. And the fact that it scales upwards just makes it more bonkers, right? Because depending on how much mana you have, you can make this a 4/5. Boom, you move up the chain one more time. Now you're spending 8 mana, but he's a 4/5, and you get 4 2/2 zombies. So this is a card that is great right at the beginning. You can spend 2 mana, put it out as a 2/3 Death Touch if you need to, or if you just want to get going right away. Like, just as a regular zombie thrown into a zombie deck. Not even considered like a zombie lord spawning more zombies and growing in power. He's just already really solid, right? So then you add on this additional power level, and it goes, whoa, this thing is going to be bonkers. Yes, you lose the tokens if you swing in with them, but still, I feel like this card is very, very powerful. It just may not be as obvious. Like certain cards, when you see them, the power level of them just grips you because you're like, dude, this is way too strong and it's immediate. This is the kind of card that I think some people are going to have to either play with or have it played against them to fully grasp just how strong this thing is. And it has really epic artwork, right? You have this who obviously once was a member of some sort of township. He was a regular everyday human. Now he's become this threat to him. And I want to point out that this guy is a 2/3 with Death Touch with one arm. He's literally missing an arm. He's got his sword just slapped over his one shoulder in this kind of restful pose. And more importantly, he has the kind of menace of the undead that has retained some of their actual mind, their sanity, well, maybe not their sanity specifically, but the capability of a human, right? A lot of zombies are your mindless kind of zombies, but this is not one of those. He's got a speculative kind of look. He's got his sword resting on his shoulder, which speaks of a certain level of intelligence. And he just cuts a very grim and impressive figure, right? Overall, his clothes are in fairly good repair. The one arm missing with like the cloth kind of flapping in the breeze to draw your attention to the fact that he's missing an arm. You might underestimate this guy, and then he strikes with a viper's speed and you're spitted on his blade that is just black because it's coated with the noxious blood of all of his victims. And he has the ability to draw in power and raise undead with him, which is really intense. And I love that he's shown in this manner. You can't actually be sure whether he's come into this manor in search of victims or whether he actually resides in this manor and it's his home. You know what I mean? Like, I really dig this as a concept, this sort of repeatable effect that you can boom, 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 stack it up and create this zombie lord style creature. So like I said, this is one of two that are somewhat connected. Let's take a look at the other one that I feel is similar to this, but also at the same time different. And that is the Indomitable Guardian. All right. Now this is 1 white and 1 for a 3/1 human scout. It's got lifelink. So I love the fact, first of all, that the black card has Death Touch. They both cost 2 mana. One has an ability that's very clearly heavily aligned with black, which is Death Touch. And then this white creature has an ability that's very much attuned with an important white ability, gaining life, right? Lifelink. So the idea of this, like, this specter of despair versus this guardian of hope, right? And one is about bringing death and the other is about bringing life. It really does have that two sides of one coin, sort of mirror-esque, but obviously not because the abilities aren't really identical, but it really does give an awesome flavor concept. So, Indomitable Guardian's ability is, when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 white and 1 any number of times. When you pay that cost once or more, put that many courage counters on Indomitable Guardian. And it says creatures you control get +1/+1 for each courage counter on Indomitable Guardian. Now, it's important to note that this affects the Guardian itself. So it does grow even if it's the only creature you have out. It's going to have +1/+1 for every counter. So this is like a walk. They have a bunch of enchantments in white that give all your creatures +1/+1. This is like a walking one of those enchantments. And a lot of those enchantments really are keyed into the idea of inspiring the troops. So it ties in really well to that concept. And it also works in a great sort of contrast to the zombie we just saw, from the perspective of the zombie is about overwhelming odds and the endless dead. And Indomitable Guardian is about overwhelming hope and giving the living more strength to fight off the dead, right? So it's got that two different ways of growing your strength. One through hopelessness and despair, and one through hope and bravery. And I love the contrast between those two concepts. Like, this, is a really, really powerful card that, again, feels like one of those cards where when you see them, at first you may go, that's all right, but once you see it in action, you gain an immense amount of respect for it. It feels like more and more Wizards are making these kind of mythics where you might look at it at first and it might not be obvious just how much it's going to make a difference, but once you play it, the respect is there. This is a very, very solid card, and I love the artwork with the gloom and the undead closing in around this group of humans, and they're the last hope. They got the lanterns held up just trying to survive, but you can see that they're not cowering, right? They're ready for what's coming. Their stances don't belie a sort of cowardly, I'm holding back fear. They hold this kind of wary readiness where I am ready to handle whatever you want to throw at us. I definitely dig this as a concept, and I really love the fact that they have a black and a white one that do feel like they're both two sides of the same coin. Now, let's move into where it gets truly broken. The final mythic we have to talk about is the Moonveil Regent. This is a crazy card. 1 red and 3 for a 4/4 flyer. So we're already looking at a pretty decent deal. 4 mana for a 4/4 flying dragon in red isn't too shabby. The fact that it's splashable with only 1 red is actually really relevant to its abilities, but also just speaks to the decent power level that we're already looking at before we get to the craziness. So, the craziness is the next ability. Whenever you cast a spell, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw a card for each of that spell's colors. It also has the ability, when Moonveil Regent dies, it deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Now, at first blush, when you look at this card, you may think to yourself, okay, they've made a domain card, and technically they have. If you're not familiar with the idea of domain literally cares about having all these different colors, right? So the more colors you have, the more you're rewarded for it. They did it with this concept Sunburst as well. There's a couple of different ways to refer to it, but ultimately the idea is the more colors of magic you have, the more power you get from this card. So obviously, if you cast a 5 different color spell, you can discard your hand and draw a card for every color. So draw 5 cards. Pitch your hand, draw 5 cards. That sounds pretty impressive. And when the creature dies, also, if you happen to have out all 5 colors worth of permanents, then you can do 5 damage to any target, which is pretty crazy, right? But ultimately, 5 color decks aren't that powerful. So maybe in a 2-color deck where you're casting 2-color spells, discard your hand, draw 2 cards. Sounds pretty good. When he gets destroyed, 2 damage to any target. Like, there's a lot packed in here. But it gets really insane to me when you think about this in just a super fast, aggressive mono red deck, right? Just a picture playing your everyday red deck where you're casting your little goblins, you're casting your burn spells and everything like that. All this does is chain extra spells. If your hand is already empty and you're playing monocolored, this just says every time you cast a spell, draw a card. And then just play the next one. So it's like, boom. Oh, I drew a 1-cost burn. Play it. Boom. Hit you with it. Oh, look, I draw a card. Oh, look, it's a cheap little creature. I play it. Oh, look, I draw a card. Like, the amount of card draw you're going to get off this is bonkers. I think some people, when they see the discard your hand, are going to see that as a massive drawback when it's not. This card is incredibly strong. 4 mana only to cast. 4/4 flying, and it will let you have a repeatable, endless stream of spells. I mean, barring grabbing lands off the top of your deck, which you can just play as well. But it's going to feed you so much gas in a mono red deck. It's going to be absolutely crazy. And who knows, its power level could also be crazy in 2 or 3 color decks as well. But it just screams to me absolutely bonkers levels of power. But I do have to say, I love the artwork from the perspective of the wings. The body of the dragon feels a little small for a 4/4. Honestly, it feels more like a 3/3, a 3/2, or a 2/3 to me. You know, even with the scale of the birds that are shown in the background, it seems like a smaller dragon. But there are a lot of 5/5, 6/6 dragons, so that's not really that big a deal. The wings, though, the wings give you the feel of stained glass and it gives it this like otherworldly kind of vibe. Do its wings only show up like that when moonlight is filtering through them? Like, that would be amazing. A beautiful and disastrous way to be destroyed. When you see it rear up in front of the moon, you're like, look at those beautiful wings, and then it just shoo, flies down out of the sky and bites you in the face. Like, no, this isn't how I wanted to go. Either way, to me, this card is broken. It genuinely feels so strong. I feel like this card could be too powerful. This card could actually end up getting banned. Now, that's my initial opinion. Obviously, we haven't seen everything that exists in the set, so we don't know what's going to be in standard overall, but I feel like this guy is going to cause some problems because his power level is nutty, and it may not be as obvious immediately, but to me, this one screams, I'm going to be the most broken Mythic in this set. I'm calling this now as the most broken Mythic in the set. Hopefully I'm not wrong, because if they make something more powerful than this, they're pretty much going to be guaranteed having to ban it. Anyhow, thus ends the discussion of the crazy Mythic rare cards. If you liked the video, then like the video. If you like what I'm doing on my channel here, consider joining my Patreon. Thanks for coming by, my friends. I will see you all for the next video.